The Hells Angel and a rival gang.
Members of the Hells Angels.
Hells Angels organization.
The Hells Angels.
It's on the Hells Angels.
March 17, 1948, the day the most notorious motorcycle club in the world was born, the Hells Angels. A group of rebels, outlaws, and thrill-seekers living by their own rules. But what are those rules? In this video, we'll uncover 13 shocking Hells Angels rules that are mandatory. Members must be voted in. Joining the Angels isn't for the faint of heart. There's a reason why this club has a reputation for being brutal and ruthless, and it demands the same from its members. Now, why would anyone want to join such a club? The simple answer is fame and respect. The Hells Angels are known and feared around the world, and their death's head patch is a symbol of power and prestige. But only a few can meet the high standards and expectations of this club, and even fewer can survive the long and grueling initiation process. So, you still want in? Well, too bad. The club doesn't recruit, it selects, and if you have to ask how to join, you don't belong. That's what the website says, at least. If you have to ask, you probably will not understand the answer. That pretty much means the good old "don't call us, we'll call you." This club doesn't just accept anybody. It takes years of testing, proving, and waiting to earn the trust and loyalty of the Hells Angels. According to Neil Hall, author of Hell to Pay, Hells Angels versus the $1 Million Rat, candidates have to know a full member for at least 5 years before they can even apply for membership. Then they have to go through 4 stages of approval, from being an official friend, to a hang-around, to a prospect, to a fully patched member. Each stage requires them to prove their loyalty, commitment, and skills to the club by doing several tasks, following orders, and riding their motorcycles anywhere and anytime. The final stage is of course the most crucial, as the entire chapter has to vote unanimously to accept the candidate, or else they're rejected. Strict dress code. So you finally earned your place among the elite. Congrats. Now here's the catch. You have to follow a rigid dress code. As soon as you become a full-fledged member of the Angels, you'll receive a vest with the infamous Death Head logo and the club's name. Along with the coveted vest, you'll get a patch with the name of your charter stitched on it. After all, you can find charters all over the world, from the US to Australia and even Belgium. The Hells Angels demand their members to wear these patches and vests whenever they're together, as a sign of their loyalty and devotion to the club, and the members proudly flaunt their logo and symbols almost anywhere they go. According to Sergeant Jacques Lemieux, a Canadian police expert in motorcycle gangs, the Angels want everyone to know that they're a part of the most powerful biker gang in the world. And what's more is that the vest is second only to their bike in importance. If a member is arrested while wearing it, they must pass it to another member to prevent it from being tainted in prison. If they're injured and need medical attention, they'll do anything to avoid having it cut or ripped off. And that leads us to the question, what if you find some Hells Angels gear that you think would look cool on you? Well, you better think twice before putting it on. These members don't take kindly to outsiders wearing their sacred vests, and they're not going to hesitate to exact revenge either. So don't think about dressing like a Hells Angel if you're not one, even if it's Halloween. As Sonny Barger writes in his book, Hells Angel, The Life and Times of Sonny Barger, members are ready to fight to the death for their club and the symbols that stand for it. So if someone is spotted wearing a patch without being a member, they're surely getting a beatdown. It's all about the bike. It's pretty obvious that every member of this club needs to own a bike. It's a rule, plain and simple. In Neil Hall's book, Hell to Pay, he lays out the main rules for anyone looking to join that club. And first and foremost, you have to have a driver's license and a motorcycle. And not just any motorcycle, mind you, it's gotta be a big Harley, not just some sissy bike. But truth be told, it's more of a tradition than an actual rule that it has to be a Harley. During an interview, Sonny Barger, a prominent figure in this club, mentioned that everyone in the club rides Harleys. However, in his autobiography, he admits that there isn't an official rule stating that the motorcycle must be exclusively from that manufacturer. Interestingly enough, though, the former chapter president had some strong opinions about Harleys. He didn't hold back, calling them pieces of junk when it comes to machinery. And he wasn't alone in his criticism, as there were some other members who felt the same way. But here's the thing, even though Japanese bikes may perform better, the Hells Angels will never give up their Harleys. It ain't about tradition, but also about patriotism. Barger also pointed out the love for that distinctive loud grumble sound that Harleys are famous for, not to mention the powerful low-end torque they offer. Ride in order. So now that we know that this is a motorcycle club, expect them to be on their bikes traveling together as a pack all the time. With a military-like structure, they obey the established order at all times, and it shows when they hit the road. The bikers line up according to seniority and rank, starting with the charter president and ending with the prospects. That's how it's always been. If you ask Sergeant Mark Baker of the Minnesota State Patrol, he says the chapter president is the brave one, leading the way, even if it means facing the most danger of crashing. Tradition has it that the vice president follows next, then the road captain, and then the sergeant of arms. But after the chapter officers, Sonny Barger in his autobiography painted a different picture. From that point back, it's a free-for-all drag race, jockeying for position. After the first 10 spots are taken, the rest fall back in from there. And of course, prospects are always at the tail of the pack. Now, to maintain order on the road, the bikers stick to their formations. And messing with their group and splitting them up is a really bad idea for anybody sharing the road with these angels. So if you spot them, just stay behind. You never know what they might do. You might think that owning a Harley and following the same rules is enough to join the Hells Angels. No, there's definitely some certain standards and secrets the notorious biker gang demands from its members. And if you fail to meet them, you could face a harsh punishment, or even a ban. Oh, and did we mention that only one gender is allowed to wear the winged skull patch? Try to guess which one. It's not a sisterhood. The Hells Angels are a tight-knit brotherhood that does not welcome women into their ranks. Women can be part of the club, especially if they're the wives or girlfriends of the members, who are often called old ladies, as mentioned by Sonny Barger in his book Hell's Angel. These women play a crucial role in the lifestyle, spending a lot of time with their partners, often traveling together. In the early days, some old ladies even proudly wore the club's patches to promote its image and reputation, according to Barger. But being an old lady doesn't grant you any privileges or rights in the club. Women are never allowed to become full-fledged members, and they can only join the meetings on rare occasions. Barger admitted that the Hells Angels are male chauvinist pigs as far as women are concerned, but we have the right to be because we want to be. The Angels also sometimes rely on women in strategic positions to spy on law enforcement and rival gangs, according to Sergeant Jacques Lemieux, as reported by the Vancouver Sun. The information they collect is crucial for the gang's survival and success, and the club has these female informants in air traffic control and even the military. No Leos allowed. So by now we know we can't just walk into the Hells Angels and ask to join. There are even some things that'll automatically make you ineligible. Like if you've ever molested or harmed a minor or are labeled as a sex offender, you can forget about it. But that's not all, because according to Neil Hall's book, Hell to Pay, the club also hates anyone who has anything to do with law enforcement. If you've ever tried becoming a cop or even a prison guard, say goodbye to your chances of joining. Even if you just applied for a job, the mere thought of wanting to be one makes you unworthy of wearing the patch. You might think that the rule is there to help the bikers avoid getting caught for their crimes, right? Well, not entirely. Hall also said that criminal activity is banned in the clubhouse and members should not bring attention to themselves. What's even more surprising is that not everyone sees them as a criminal organization. The United States does. And the police have harassed the club so much that members have eventually sued. But in British Columbia, they're not considered a criminal organization, even though the police have raided their clubhouses. But there's more to it than that, because the real reason why no Leos, as in law enforcement officers, are allowed is that the Hells Angels value loyalty above all else, and they would never trust someone who had sworn an oath to any other group or cause, even if it is to uphold the law. Never snitch on a brother. Oh, these guys have no tolerance for anybody betraying the club or its members to the cops. They ban snitches and rats from ever joining their ranks, Neil Hall wrote in Hell to Pay, which is an obvious way to protect the club. But some of these bikers might despise these traitors even more than convicted criminals, whom Hall also said are forbidden to join the club. So there's a deeper level of hatred here for snitches. Sonny Barger, who's blunt in his book Hell's Angel, when he talked about these kind of things, he said, "Most rats are loudmouth bullies who like to boss people around and act tough. When the club backs them up, they beat their chests and shout about how much they love the club and how they're going to stay with us forever." He added that when they get in trouble, they rat on their brothers to save their own hides. He also said that because the club values brotherhood and loyalty so much, a rat is the true enemy. Hush Hush. Now these guys are a secretive bunch and very guarded because they just don't want the public in their business, which is why they forbid their members from talking to the press. If anyone is going to talk to the press for any reason, it's going to be the president of the chapter. Lower members wouldn't dare talk to the press. The best you'll get out of them is no comment. This is one of the many measures they have to take to protect their privacy and security. They don't want reporters prying into their personal information, and as Sonny Barger said in his autobiography, he confessed that there's other rules and secrets that the Angels will never reveal to the public. 2009, the biker gang's attitude towards the media was evident at their annual summer rally in Carlton, Minnesota. About 500 of these infamous bikers showed up, but the reporters who came to that event saw these Angels either shut up or turn away from the media whenever they were around. They just don't trust the media, and who really does? Because they don't know how they're going to spin the story and twist their words. But that's not the only reason. These Angels also don't want anyone to speak for the club who has no authority to do so. The inner workings are only for the club members and no one else. The only people who know what's happening in the club are those who are allowed to know. Even some people inside are clueless. The Hells Angels are a very secretive organization. If you have to ask someone what's going on, then you probably don't need to know. And it ain't just the media they're wary of. As a Hells Angel, you have to follow a written bylaw and an unwritten rule that you cannot share any information about another member. I mean, just look at their website, it clearly states, "We do not answer questions about members." Even though the Hells Angels don't consider themselves a criminal organization, they still acknowledge that some of their members may be involved in activities outside of the law. And because of this, no members are allowed to discuss these outside activities at the club or in any way that would tarnish the club's reputation. As a matter of fact, some experts believe that the reason law enforcement agencies categorize the club as criminal is because it's easier for them to target the entire organization rather than specific individuals within the club. Say no to drugs. Let's face it, the Hells Angels don't have a reputation for being squeaky clean. Throughout their existence, they've made trouble with their business. They even had celebrities with bad reputations like Rusty Coons and David LaBrava. Yet, surprisingly, the one thing that hasn't made it into their business is drugs. Whereas some other bike gangs might become closely associated with the drug trade, as with their bikes, the Hells Angels have a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to illegal substances. Members are strictly forbidden from using them or selling them. If they're caught doing either, they can kiss that membership goodbye. However, that doesn't mean they haven't had their run-ins with drugs and law enforcement in the past. 2002, the Rochester charter was busted by the FBI and DEA for running a drug ring. The leader and vice president was sentenced to 25 years in prison, and we have some Angels admitting to even smoking weed, though they are expected to follow certain guidelines to avoid causing problems for the club. Like, for example, heroin and needles are off limits, because they believe that drug addicts cannot be trusted and always put the club first. Be nice. Make no mistake, the Angels aren't the kind of people you want to mess with. Yet they're not really the ruthless villains that some may think. Behind those leather jackets and tattoos, they have a code of honor and a sense of community that often goes unnoticed. For example, all members are expected to show respect and brotherly love to other members of their charter. A lot of charters also require members to show love and respect to the outside world by even engaging in charity work. According to the Belfast Telegraph, the Hells Angels regularly participate in charity events and causes, sometimes even in surprising ways. In 2002, a British group of Hells Angels rode for the Queen as part of a fundraiser for an anti-bullying organization called Kidscape. And even in the US, members were expected to participate in toy drives around the holidays. In 2015, CNBC News reported that the Angels started camping outside a Walmart in Fresno, California, for 5 days before the holiday rush kicked off. When it did, they bought all the bikes the store had as a donation to a local homeless shelter. In 2020, the Stockton Hells Angels put out a call that they were collecting donations to fulfill the wish lists of local families and children. At that time, Hells Angels Matt Yarber explained, "A lot of these kids don't have anything. They don't have any presents or anything, and somebody's got to do something." And then there's the fact that they have a zero tolerance for assault and violence against women. And honestly, they may not be many people's idea of model citizens, but in some ways, the rest of the world could do well to follow their lead. The club and the brothers always comes first. Dave Shaky Atwell was the highest-ranking Hells Angels to ever betray the club and become a police informant. In an interview, he revealed the secrets and sins of the notorious biker gang. He said that once he joined the club, he had a duty to serve the club. That was my life. But what does it mean to serve the club? The Belfast Telegraph investigated the inner workings of the biker world and spoke with a biker named Colin. He was part of another group, but he knew some Angels, and he said he never became one because he couldn't give them them the 100% they demanded. He said, "The hardest part is knowing how to deal with having a family. You always have to put the club first. It's a real commitment. You can't hold down a full-time job because if the club needs you and calls, you have to be there. If you don't show up when called," Collins said, "you're basically flipping off the club. And that ain't something they take lightly." He said that having kids might give you some slack, but not much. The club always comes before family and jobs. Anything else? Forget about it. Nothing matters more than the club. You see, this club is like an army, and their members are soldiers. They depend on each other in times of trouble, and they're always there to back each other up, even if it means getting into this bloody and violent conflict. In 1976, that's what George Christie learned before he became an angel. He was a prospect for the LA chapter, and he witnessed how the club president, Old Man John, dealt with a troublemaker. John punched him several times and held a knife to his throat while looking at Christie to see his reaction. After seeing in his eyes that Christie was willing to back whatever action John took, the president was satisfied with the recruit. John then ripped off the man's jacket and threw him out of the bar. That's how it is in the Hells Angels. You're part of a huge family, and they have another cool rule, that when one biker gets pulled over, they all pull over together. It doesn't matter if it's the cops or a mechanical issue. They stick together. That's supposed to be a sign of solidarity, but if you're a cop who has to face 100 angry Hells Angels, you might call it intimidation. And well, it works. Don't think about joining other clubs or gangs. So just like how they don't want their members taking oaths to serve the law, they also don't want their members' loyalty towards another group. This rule was so strict that the Angels forbade their members from joining the American Motorcyclist Association, as Sonny Barger wrote in his autobiography. This rule is so important for rival groups that have bad blood with the Angels, which are many biker gangs, because throughout their existence, the Angels have been at war with many clubs, including the Mongols. In 2002, one of their most vicious battles in recent memory happened when the two enemies clashed at a Nevada casino, and all hell broke loose. George Christie described that situation as a war between armies, with Hells Angels fighting against all major clubs on the West Coast. So this is why the Hells Angels warn on their website to never combine your support to Hells Angels with other clubs, street gangs, or others if you are unaware of the relationship between those others and the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. This means that you cannot be friends with anyone who is not approved by the club. And so if you're still thinking about joining, you'd have to cut all unwanted ties and friendships, and still hope that's all they ask of you. Once a Hells Angel, always a Hells Angel. So to cap this video, we say that to join the Hells Angels, you have to prove your loyalty beyond doubt. The initiation process is long and thorough, designed to weed out the weak and the wavering. Once you're in for life. There is no official way to retire from this club, unless you die. A chapter becomes a member's new family, and his brothers gather to honor his memory when he does die. Sonny Barger said in Hells Angel how the cops used to mock the bikers for their mile-long processions for funerals of deceased members in the early history of the club, but now that's common practice that many people respect. But not everyone stays loyal to the club. Some members have to cut ties with the Angels because of legal troubles. Others are kicked out for violating the club's code of conduct. For them, expulsion is not the end of their ordeal. They have to endure the pain of having their angel tats burned off their skin. They also have to give up anything that bears the Hells Angels name or the Death Head logo. This would include their jackets, bikes, and rings. One of the most famous cases of this was George Christie's retirement. This guy was a former member who claimed he left the club on good terms after explaining his reasons for quitting. But he soon found out that he wasn't welcome anymore. He was out bad, meaning that he had no standing with the club, and he had lost all contact with the men he once called his brothers.